Hello and welcome to The Signal, Workplace NL's health and safety podcast. Workplace NL is the Workers' Compensation Board in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The focus is to promote safe and healthy workplaces, provide return-to-work programs, and offer compensation to injured workers and their dependents. This series of podcasts will provide you with the latest information on how workplaces can protect the health and safety of workers. Please enjoy the show.
The physical benefits of regular movement and exercise in improving our physical health have long been established. For many years, physicians have been encouraging us to participate in some type of aerobic activity in order to maintain good physical health. Exercise is also considered vital for maintaining overall mental fitness and helps us to manage and reduce stress. My name is DeeAnne Feltham-Scott, and I'm an OHS Educational Consultant in Prevention Services at Workplace NL. Today I'm joined by Ryan Osborne, Kinesiologist and owner of Oz Coaching, to discuss how regular movement and exercise throughout your workday can help you manage stress that you encounter on a daily basis. So Ryan, let's start with defining movement. How do you define movement?
Good question, which I think can certainly have a variety of answers depending on who you ask in terms of their backgrounds. The way I kind of view it, because I'm someone that really takes all movement, all body movement as really something that we should focus on, things that can be completely subconscious, and then also things that you've got to place some mental consciousness and intentionality to it. So I break movement up into two things, which is non-structured or non-intentional and structured or intentional movement. And so what does that look like? Well, non-intentional movement is honestly just your day-to-day ups and downs, right? Washroom breaks, just doing your errands, moving to and fro your work, commuting back and forth, and just things that you don't really place any sort of consciousness to it. So that's non-intentional because number one, yes, you have to do it. We can still probably even be a little bit better just fidgeting, using a sit-stand work desk where it's forcing you to even stand or sit, even though you're not technically physically moving through space. The very fact that if you do use it regularly, which, every 30 minutes, we know you should be kind of changing positions, that is still technically movement, okay, that your muscles have to do. Whereas intentional or more structured movement would be things such as I'm going to go for a 20-minute brisk walk, or a walk really that is brisk enough and it's intentional that you've made that plan that you're going to go for X number of minutes. Yes, the classic workout, either from home or in a gym, a yoga class, a spin class, go for a hike, swimming, all those things are more intentional. And when you look at, well, what about, there's really not much difference there. It's just steps. Well, as we'll talk about, you kind of got to look at what are your outcomes that you want. And because movement, there's so many types out there, then you're going to get different benefits from doing different types of movement. And I think that's really where you want to kind of hang your hat on, is not just the very fact of, well, I have to move because it's for my health or anything like that. It's, well, one, as you're going to, we're going to certainly go down and discuss about the stress benefits that come from movement. It again, you got to look at it and say, well, what can I gain from completing ideally different forms of movement kind of on a regular basis, because that just gives your body and your mind, physical mind-body relationship, just that enhancement to adapt to whatever benefits that you get from. And then that's going to be more optimal, especially into your later years.
So how much movement do we need during a day? I've heard 10,000 steps a day is what we should be all aiming for. And I know that getting those steps in certainly does increase our movement through the day, but how much movement do we need?
Let's start off first by, I think what most people maybe have heard is, the Canadian Medical Association, American Heart Association has recommended for some time now where, 150 minutes per week of, moderate strenuous activity. And they haven't put what type, meaning strength or cardio or anything. It's just called strenuous activity.
Right.
So we put that precursor out there. But the way I look at that is absolutely some people can hit that regularly. But I would say the average based on Newfoundland stats, in the country when it comes to just our health stats, obesity, diabetes, and a lot of the metabolic diseases, and I'll take it not just Newfoundland, but Canadian and even American stats when it comes to metabolic diseases. We're not in a good place. So I'll say probably for really to umbrella people, the average person is probably not getting close near 150 minutes. So the way someone says, well, how much movement should we need? I look at it and say, well, how much movement are you doing right now? And honestly, any more movement than that is better. Yes, that's a pretty generic and cliche way of saying that, but truly, when we do now know with some of the studies that have been coming out recently, that you really just need to move yourself, not excessive. In some people's minds, 10,000 steps might be like far from it. Because if you're only getting, say, 3,500 steps on average, then 10,000 steps is almost 3 times what you're currently doing. That's a huge jump. So when I'm coaching clients and that, I always kind of meet them where they are and look at it and say, maybe can we get 1,000 to 2,000 steps extra? Now, a meta-analysis that came out in August of this year that studied 227,000 participants from, I think it was 27 research studies. They pooled all the information and they showed that 1,000 step increment per day decreased all-cause mortality rates by 15%. So when you really stop and think that, like 1,000 steps, that might be a 10-minute walk, if that, depending on your speed and how your strides, I guess, your stride length, all that kind of stuff. But that, for generic wise, is about that, right? Maybe around a 10, 12-minute walk, you might get 1,000 steps. Well, if someone said, here's something that you can reduce your all-cause mortality risk by 15%, you just need to do that 10, 12 minutes. Well, what if you end up doing a 30-minute walk most days? Well, now you've increased that upwards of 45%. So I just look at movement and say, well, where are you? So I come from 2 angles here. The health benefits of moving more, I just alluded to, is significant. Just your mental health benefits, stress reduction, more clarity, obviously all-cause mortality risks. You are obviously managing your weight better. You can manage your blood sugars better, blood pressure, cholesterol. These things all happen with increasing your movement. But the other one that I think maybe it doesn't get talked about is goal benefits of moving more. And what I mean by that is truly, what are you wanting in life? So wherever you are right now in your age, where do you want to be in terms of your quality of living and the status of your health 20 years from now, 30 years from now, or maybe 40 or 50 years from now, depending on what age you are? That's the way I look at it, at least with myself, is I'm 43. And I understand all the health benefits of exercises and movement, but I also really prioritize wanting to live as long as I can, yes, but also live and being super active, doing hikes when I'm 90, like playing sports potentially when I'm 90, and having strength well beyond my years. For me, when I bring that to the forefront, if I'm not feeling like I want to move on some day, like that's what really carries me forth. And again, all movement matters, right? So just literally sit standing, going and choosing. So if you're in the office, maybe the washroom or the water cooler that's a floor above or below you, try that instead of the one that might be just outside your desk. If you're home, instead of going up and down the stairs just once, go up and down 3 or 4 times. If your office is downstairs, every time you take the stairs, do 3 or 4 flights in a row so that your heart rate increases. Your muscles of the legs increase. These things all add up outside of course, trying your best at prioritizing more intensive-based exercise that would come from, say, working out, strength training, yoga, spin classes, cardio, and things like that.
You just listed a couple of easy hits that we can increase movement through our workday. I mean, for many of us, we come in, we start our work at 8:30, and many of us don't move until it's time to go home at 4:30. What are some other ways besides going to the water cooler upstairs or taking the stairs instead of the elevator that we can incorporate some of these little quick hits into our day?
Absolutely. Very common question because I do, corporate wellness services as well and present in that. And Workplace NL, you guys have really promoted, especially in the MSI preventive department, is, talking about micro breaks, right? And micro breaks really can kind of include a variety of things, but the very fact that, every 30 minutes you should take 5 minutes, every hour, maybe, 5 to 10 minutes. If you only even have 2 minutes, it still is to take that break for the purpose of just allowing you to break from your work. So if you want to even be more productive. So there's a lot of research that talks about just upping your energy, giving your mind a bit of a break from what you were just doing so that you can get back to it and keep that so-called productivity and mental clarity there. But then I also look at it from, yes, a health perspective, and if even an exercise or fitness perspective, is that you should, yes, change your position, right? So again, when we're talking about MSI prevention, if you're seated and or standing, so we either use a sit-stand desk, if you're standing or seated for extended periods of time, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours plus, then naturally you're putting your muscles at risk for just becoming tense and overcompensation and all that stuff that can just lead to chronic, really musculoskeletal injuries.
Exactly.
But I view not micro breaks, I term the coin micro workouts.
Yeah.
And so I've coached some of my clients that are workers at desks or maybe executives, anything like that, where it really forces them to kind of work many, many hours. And I just look at it and say, it's got to take the path of least resistance. So if I had to say, you know what, I do want you to take a 5 or 10 minute break every 30 minutes, that's realistically probably not going to happen. But I'm like, at least on the hour, you put an alarm on your computer or on your watch or your phone that it pings off. And the purpose is you've got to actually move.
Yeah.
Now, some people like to sit back in their chair and they might do some deep breathing, and that's fine too, because that's going to be a great stress reducer.
Right.
But I try to look at that and say, well, how can we get some breath increasing, but by also maybe moving or exercising? So that's where I call it micro, workouts. And that if you did 10 desk push-ups or 10 squats or held a plank on the floor, doing some jumping jacks, or just marching, literally just standing and marching with your knees bringing up to your chest, okay, and you're moving your arms as well, like you're kind of doing a full-on march. And if you were doing that, I'll just say regularly, whatever that looks like for you, you're going to get a significant boost in just energy, because of course blood flow is going to have to increase circulation. You're going to get a little bit more clear. If your breath increases, then just that natural increasing of your oxygen capacity will help give a little bit of calmness. And you are getting steps if that's something that you might want to track, fine and dandy. Or you're challenging your muscles if you say do something like those are like basic push-ups or squats. So again, when you just look at it for what it is at that one time, well, I'm only doing 5 push-ups each time I do a little micro break or a micro workout. But if you did that on the hour, well, then if it's an 8-hour day, that's 40 push-ups. 40 push-ups. Maybe you can't even do 40 push-ups straight out, but 40 push-ups a day, or then 40 or 50 squats a day, that's going to be significant, because if you can't get, say, any other workout or strength training in a traditional workout time, but you only are doing these little micro breaks, well, is that better than doing nothing, or what you were doing if you weren't doing anything?
Oh my
Significantly.
gracious.
So
Absolutely.
the micro workouts,
Yeah.
I look at it and say what the average person is probably doing, and also what is the path of least resistance. Because when we look at just habit formation, the principles of habit, it needs to be easy and just very accessible. Right? Yes, it should be enjoyable, and I'm not saying that exercise is enjoyable for people, but if it's not accessible or really easy, then it's just going to be very hard to maintain it. You might start it because it's a new habit, it's January or whatever, but it's really hard to maintain it. So you just got to look at it and say, well, what's one notch up? So if I'm right now probably a 1 out of 10. 10 is like ultimately what you'd like to get to in terms of, physical activity in a run of a day or week. Well, where are you on that continuum? And maybe what does that one extra notch look like for you? And that may mean something like a simple micro workout done just a couple of times during your shift, and there could be significant benefits by doing it.
Well, I know for myself, I'm busy, full-time job, children who are young adults now, but still keep me busy. I can attest to incorporating these short periods of movement into my day. And it doesn't take long for it to add up. Every morning, I walk for either 10 to 20 minutes, depending on how much time I have. During break, I walk 10 to 20 minutes. Lunch times, after work, I skate, I do Pilates, I do yoga.
Awesome.
And all of that does add up to make movement a part of your day. But I can also tell you, those days that I'm not having the time, or taking the time, I should say, to do that 10, 20 minutes in the morning, to do the 10, 20 minutes lunchtime, it really does make a huge impact on the overall movement that I'm making. That 20 to 40 minutes, when it's done in those small increments, really doesn't take a lot out of your day.
Yep, and studies, just to comment on that point, studies have shown that, if anything, not only the same, but there is even proof to have a slight enhancement to a small degree, more beneficial when you do, say, 2 20-minute bouts versus 1 40-minute bout, because of the after effect. So when you're doing 20 minutes, especially if it's something that, say, like a good intentional whether it's a really brisk walk or, like I said, maybe even a cardio bout. But you get the benefits from calories if that's the kind of the thing that some people are looking at it from a weight management perspective. But there's health benefits that cross both when you break things down into two smaller bouts versus one long bout. Some people look at it and will say, I didn't get my 40, so doing two smaller bouts is not going to be as beneficial. And this is why I tell people like that do maybe use fitness trackers and things like that, is that they're great accountability tools. There's no question. It's great giving us some real-time feedback, but at the end of the day, you want to set yourself up for success and not necessarily be so driven by your ability to hit a certain number, or you're setting realistic expectations to it. But if any sort of tool, regardless of what it is, it does kind of make you move more, especially when you need that reminder when you're super busy. So for my watch, I've set it so that every 15 minutes it just buzzes. And the only time it buzzes, it'll say on my watch, move, but I just know when it buzzes what it means. It doesn't really matter, as you just alluded to, about kind of how it is. But the reality is you have to go back to really honing in on what, by being more active, what does that do? Forget even the physical benefits, because we all know that, and I just already talked about a few of them. But it's about, especially nowadays, right, with the mental conditions of so many individuals, the burnouts, just the stress of trying to just get through life, being a parent, running a job, or just being a worker. I feel there's nothing like, out of all the stress management tools that I personally use, and again, this is just me personally, some people might look at yoga or meditation or gratitude in the same light, but for me, when I'm in the gym doing strength training, that is my biggest zen place. And even though I'm putting in hard work, it's the after effect that is worth $1 billion to me, in a sense, right?
Absolutely.
Where I know the rest of my day, my mental capacity, my stress, anxiety, all that stuff is in, I'll just say, in a good place to be. Whereas if I go consecutive days where I just can't get to the gym, not only is my energy down, I just feel sluggish. My food habits may not be as where they should be based off of where my goals need it to be. Sleep, which we haven't even talked about. We know that sleep is clearly one of the biggest influencers of managing your stress. And we also know on the other end that exercise, regular movement and or exercise, has a significant benefit to helping you get better sleep. So when you compare, if I'm going to have more movement, which causes me to have better sleep, which then helps me to manage my stress, now you have all the reasons to exercise and be more active.
Absolutely.
Right?
Your zen place is the gym. My zen place is outdoors, walking my dogs. Just goes to show how we're all different.
Absolutely.
And we have to start with where we are and what we enjoy. And once we start doing things throughout our day that we enjoy, then that's going to increase the likelihood that we're going to keep moving through our day.
I agree with that. The enjoyability is something that, because I know sometimes exercise is just viewed in, okay, I have to do it to manage weight, or I'm going to do it because it burns 450 calories. And I honestly just think that if that's your primary viewpoint on exercise, I would argue that more times than not, that individual is going to probably struggle with exercise for the majority of their life, because they're not really looking at it from the lens of enjoyability and what it kind of just produces to them. And so that's why I honestly, if you have to kind of break movement down, and it's one thing to say, how much movement do you need, Ryan, or should we have Ryan? I think the when is just as important, meaning when you should get movement, because I think any listener will probably know the later they leave it for the day, even with good intentions, either you won't get it in at all, or just I'll say the vigor and the energy that you have to put through it, it's going to probably be I got to do it, I just have to, whatever. Whereas morning it sets your day up. There's without question.
The focus of the podcast and of this week is psychological health and safety. So what can an employer do to kind of create that culture of movement? I
have to just view it, and like I said, I've worked with organizations. I've developed wellness programs for organizations. I've worked with the executive crews of various organizations, big or small, and that's really where number one it needs to start first, is from the top in terms of organizational, and it really has to be almost a core values. So you'll have your core values with treating employees for what they should be treated, empathy, and just caring for their customers and or their staff and all those things. But I honestly view it as, we now know, especially I'll say since COVID, but well before COVID, let's all agree that, you know, the importance of mental health was still top of mind, or should have been top of mind. But I just think certainly COVID has really created much more importance because of stress, burnout, and just the way the world that we live in. So you have to sync mental health with physical well-being. I think that's the thing, is that when you kind of separate it, and naturally you're going to have different ideologies and different practices and solutions and services that can address just mental health and just the physical health. But when an organization values, I'll just say, the overall well-being of their staff, then it is much easier when you are considering implementing any initiatives. So I do think operationally, employers need to look at having an engaged culture, but a culture that definitely does prioritize and value, you know, movement. And what does that look like, you know, right down to some actual organizational degrees, where, you know, whether it's challenges, whether it's walk meetings, you know, whether it's just, you know, literally group, when they get everybody together, depending on the size of the business, where you're doing group stretches or group movements prior to maybe starting a meeting or anything like that. You've got awarenesses on things, but challenges. The executive are part of everything that the company does, not just this is for our staff and the executive does their own thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day,
leading by example.
It has to be leading by example.
Exactly.
And listen, everyone's stressed. So I never ever really like to kind of say like, well, the C-suite in organizations need, I'll say, exercise. Like, we're all under stress, but sometimes depending on your responsibility at work, yes, some executives may be under more stress, I'll say, or maybe working longer hours as expected by them. They 100% should be involved on it and not just viewed as, hey, this is what we're going to do for our staff. But again, you can't make things mandatory. So it still has to be put in the light where, from a communication piece, that this is just something that we believe in, that we want to provide as much opportunity. Because again, yes, some people might just, if your workplace might be around a trail or what have you, so getting some people out might like that. Whereas others, maybe they do want more of an intensive class. Any sort of offerings that you may look at, it has to be almost an a la carte, whereas you're hitting people because everyone likes things a little bit differently. And then I think the last thing is getting consistent feedback and input, and just literally integration of what the staff's needs and wants are as you build an employee wellness program. I think that's the other thing. And now there's so many great businesses that do provide virtual health or virtual care and all these things, and that's wonderful. But I do think, like I said, it has to start kind of almost in an ingrained corporate value. You get the top buy-in, and then it's just kind of really, it's just natural.
Are there any professionals that can help an employer get started, or an individual?
I supply primarily, one-on-one lifestyle and fitness coaching, for working professionals. And I do that, virtually and online, where I cover really, movement, nutrition, mindset, accountability, lifestyle factors, all that taken in. But another part of my business is corporate wellness, where I do, besides common, like say lunch and learns, I do monthly challenges that are habit-based, where they use my software, and it's such a, I'll say, easy kind of buy-in for people, especially on the, I'll say, beginner stage, if you will, right? Because these whole, hey, here's a discounted rate at a gym, a lot of people don't like gyms, right? So even though that's an easy way for employers to do, and yeah, you could get a discounted rate, you might only hit 5 or 10, not even, I think the rates are around 5 to 7% of your work staff that might take advantage of that. So you got to look at it and say, well, again, how can we service people that might want to value more mental health, maybe more physical health? I just like challenges. I think we all have a little bit competitive spirit, where it's all about just creating habits. I mean, at the end of the day, it is about creating habits. Some people might be more advanced, but for most people that probably do need some help or to improve their health a little bit, you've got to look at it from not just an X number of days or weeks kind of that you're doing something. It is a lifestyle, but in order to reach lifestyle, there's work that has to be put in there.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation that we had today. I learned a lot, and I know that our listeners will have learned a lot as well.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. Transcripts are available to use in your workplace to increase workers' knowledge in various occupational health and safety topics. Visit workplacenl.ca for more information on the services we provide to workplaces. Feel free to share the signal on social media to improve workplace health and safety everywhere. Thank you and have a safe and healthy day.